Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of your daily guides. Today we are working with a level 999 Silver Wolf setup, and the first thing to clear up is Eidolon 1. It does not increase her damage output in a meaningful way because of how her kit functions, and the value it provides is tied more to uptime and rotation rather than raw scaling. I will break that down shortly, but before that, it is more useful to establish what actually affects her performance and how to go about building her. From testing across multiple accounts, running her at E0S0 or E0S1 creates a noticeable gap unless you pair her with at least one additional Elation unit who is not the Elation trailblazer. The options that consistently stabilize her output are Sparkle, Ye, or Yao Guang, while Elation Trailblazer works as a fallback but comes with a clear drop in both damage and overall consistency if alone. Without that third Elation source, her damage profile feels incomplete, so unless you are investing heavily into Eidolons, team structure matters more than vertical investment. Moving into light cones, her signature remains the most effective choice because it directly scales what her kit wants, which is speed and elation damage. Her entire performance loop improves as her speed increases, so anything that contributes to that stat has immediate value. Outside of her signature, most available Elation light cones lean towards support effects rather than direct damage, which ends up reinforcing the need for a third Elation unit. These light cones either increase vulnerability to Elation damage or boost Elation percentage for allies. For traces, there is no meaningful optimization path where one ability clearly outperforms the others in priority. The gains are evenly distributed across her kit, so the most efficient approach is to level everything. A full 10-10-10 investment aligns with how her damage and utility scale together, and partial investment tends to feel inconsistent rather than efficient. Relics are where her build becomes more defined. The 4-piece Ever-Glorious Magical Girl set, combined with the 2-piece Punk Lord stage set, gives the best balance of scaling. The 4-piece bonus increases crit damage and introduces a stacking mechanic where accumulated punchline allows allies to ignore a portion of enemy defense when dealing Elation damage. 2-piece set increases Elation percentage and adds a conditional crit damage boost once certain thresholds are reached in combat. Together, these effects directly support both her personal output and team amplification. Speed is the most important stat breakpoint in her build. At 171 speed, she reaches the maximum Elation scaling available in her kit, so hitting that threshold is not optional if you want optimal performance. Beyond that, additional speed still has value, but the priority shifts toward crit stats. Crit rate should be built to a reasonable baseline because once it exceeds 100% during combat, any excess converts into crit damage. This conversion mechanic means you are effectively double-dipping on value, so a target like a 1-to-2 ratio around 60% crit rate to 120% crit damage works as a stable foundation outside of combat. Once buffs are active in battle, especially from units like Elation Trailblazer and her own kit, reaching 100% crit rate becomes consistent. At that point, your crit damage scales much higher, often landing in the 200 to 250% range during actual gameplay. That difference between pre-combat and in-combat stats is important when evaluating her performance. Her Eidolon 1 specifically modifies her ultimate cycle rather than her damage. In her enhanced state, she builds MMR, which normally resets to 0 when the state ends. With Eidolon 1, 20% of the accumulated MMR is retained, allowing her to cycle back into her ultimate faster. This improves uptime but does not increase the damage of each rotation, which is why the impact feels limited. If you are considering a stopping point for investment, Eidolon 2 remains the more practical breakpoint, as it aligns better with overall efficiency. In terms of team building, her performance is heavily dependent on having the correct support structure. Without Sparkle or Ye, you will feel both a damage loss and reduced utility. With either of them, or any additional Elation unit beyond the main slot, her kit functions much more smoothly, and her scaling becomes consistent. So, in general, reaching 171 speed as a priority, establish a stable crit ratio, and rely on in-combat buffs to push those values higher. Pair her with at least one strong Elation support aside from the trailblazer, and treat Eidolons as optional upgrades rather than core requirements. Once those conditions are met, her performance stabilizes, and the rest becomes incremental optimization rather than fixing weaknesses.